All right, time now for the exchange. You want to take a look at what's ahead. Joining us live now is a former IDF spokesperson, retired Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and co-founder of Bottom Line Media. Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us. I just want to talk about the IDF perspective and how they're viewing this ceasefire, this phase one of this ceasefire. Are they viewing it as a tactical, operational pause, or a real step, a real genuine step towards lasting peace here in a way that actually guarantees Palestinian security and dignity going forward?
Yeah, good evening from Israel. Thanks for having me on. Peace is a very big word, and I think in as much as I would want to apply it with relation to Gaza, that is not how the IDF, or I would say 99% of Israelis, I haven't done a survey, but I think a vast majority of Israelis would look at this. This is first and foremost a ceasefire that hopefully will facilitate the return of Israeli hostages after more than 2 years in Hamas captivity. If and when that stage is successfully completed, then that will bring about or facilitate many positive things: the disarmament of Hamas, the freeing Gaza from Hamas and making sure that they don't govern. And you ask about the IDF. Well, the IDF is prepared. I think they're pretty vigilant, redeployed now according to the first withdrawal line, but also battle wise and knowing that Hamas may very likely want to derail, perhaps not now, but perhaps when it becomes more challenging for Hamas to implement President Trump's deal. For instance, when it comes to disarmament, maybe then the IDF will meet Hamas attacks, and the IDF is prepared for that.
Jonathan, it is amazing to have even gotten to stage one here and to see that these hostages will be reunited finally after 2 horrific years with their family members, that civilians in Gaza can get some quiet now and semblance of building their lives back together, and the humanitarian aid that they need. But in terms of phase two, Hamas has not agreed to laying down its arms. In fact, even now, they've deployed their own internal security forces in areas where Israel has already pulled out, even though Israel still controls about 53% of the enclave. So I don't know who these internal security forces are. But going forward, I mean, is it realistic to assume that you could see international Arab peacekeepers inside of Gaza patrolling the streets? Or is this something that you think ultimately, if things derail, will fall on the IDF again to resume fighting? And as we know, that is not something that President Trump wants to see happen, or anybody in the world really wants to see happen at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you speak of the hostages, and I think you're one of very, very few journalists who really have followed this issue. I think when you speak about human suffering on both sides of the border, it is genuine. And yes, it is a very happy moment in Israel to finally, hopefully, have our brothers and sister back home. About, the chances, I've been saying and tweeting and speaking about this, that Hamas is a jihadi terrorist organization which whole creed is about the destruction of the state of Israel. Therefore, I agree with the premise of what you're saying. It is indeed difficult to envision that Hamas will lay down their weapons. But I think the core of the agreement, the end of the war agreement that President Trump formulated, there's the publicly available document, which everybody has seen based on Israeli media. And then there are the not available, hidden or confidential riders to the agreement. Now, here is really where the most important matter is, because I believe and I understand that those scenarios, if Hamas refuses to do what they're supposed to do, what the Qataris and the Turks and the Egyptians and everybody else has told them to do, if they refuse to disarm, if they refuse to relinquish control over Gaza, and if they try to continue to establish control, then there will be kinetic countermeasures. Now, I agree, yes, we do not want to go back to war. That's pretty clear. There are perhaps some parts of Israeli society who would, or politicians, but at the end of the day, the Israeli population, the nation, is battle weary, and we would really want to get on with life, rebuilding, recovering, tending to our more than 7,000 wounded soldiers, and really going on with doing what we want to do, and that is to live. But if Hamas refuses, if they renege on the deal, then there are consequences, and I believe that they have been established ahead of time between the US and Israel.
Right, Jonathan Conricus, live for us. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.